Good evening and welcome to Breaking the Consensus, Family and Life's interview program with people who have good stories, but stories that the mainstream media don't really want you to hear. Tonight, I'm with that wonderful pro-life warrior and Dr. Ann McCloskey. Good evening, Ann.
Hi, how are you, Patty?
I'm
We
good.
got there. We got there with the technology.
Yes, I think this lockdown is forcing us all to find uses for technology we're not very good with.
Yeah.
You have returned to work because of the COVID.
During our glitch with the technology, I was actually downloading a whole lot of emails about how to do video consultations and where we are with COVID and all that. So yeah, there's a lot of, I last did a locum in the practice about 3-4 weeks ago, and everything has changed. The whole way of working has changed because obviously there's no face-to-face stuff, and we're having to find new ways of examining people remotely and trying to assess their problems and where they are, and it's quite bizarre. Yeah, I retired a year ago, but I probably have the worst retirement plan in the world because I retired at the end of April, and at the beginning of May I was elected as a councillor for N2 for Derry and Strabane District Council. So there went my plans for reading and taking life easy and stuff like that. And being a counsellor is pretty full on. It's you don't get paid for a full-time job, but it's fairly busy. And then not only am I sort of doing the counselling bit, but I'm also, for my sins, giving Pater a hand and trying to do the northern half of our All Ireland political movement into. So, and there's a bit involved in that. Some of the people down there probably think I don't do very much, but I do my best.
I'm sure they know you work very hard, but let's get back. I want to get to your role with N2, but I want to talk to you straight away because it's something that's going to be on everyone's mind. You came back to work after retiring. You've come back into the GP's practice at the height of a dangerous and infectious disease. And I'm sure there's people out there saying, is she mad?
Because people have been saying, is she mad, for quite a while now. That wouldn't be anything new. I'm not back yet because there is, they put out a call, and incredibly 40,000 people. It's just, I am in awe of the human race. 40,000 people from all walks of life, including clinicians like myself. But 40,000 people have volunteered to help our NHS, of which we are inordinately proud and would defend to the last breath of our being. And I'm one among many, and it's quite embarrassing actually, because I'm I don't like to say high profile, but I'm well enough known about the town, and the local paper kind of ran this front page stuff about me, and I came across like bloody Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and it couldn't be further than the truth. This is just something that, yeah, sure, you have to. Our postman was up here today, and I chat to him every day, and he rolled down the van window, and he told me he was frightened, going to people's houses, and
Of course.
The girls in the supermarket who are there stocking the shelves, you can see they're afraid. So
they are.
Fear is, everybody's afraid. I'm actually not afraid. If somebody gave me a petri dish now with COVID in it, I would say, give me it now, get it to hell out of the road, and I'll take my chances, and then you'll know that you're grand. It's this waiting and this uncertainty that's driving people insane. And this is the calm before the storm. We are going to have mayhem next week, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, likely.
It is that fear. It's that fear of the unknown. It's that fear. What is it going to do to me? What will I give it to my parents? Will I give it to my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother? There's a real fear out there now.
Yeah, people are, and it's amazing because no matter who you speak to, a lot of people are kind of going, well, I'll take my chances with it, but my sister has asthma, and people are genuinely, and it's really inspiring to see people are actually looking and saying, I'm putting my life on hold because of the people around me, because of of the neighbours. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's quite inspiring to see. So I was writing a wee article for Into actually yesterday, and for one of the local papers, and I was talking about superheroes don't wear capes. You know, so many people are finding in themselves resources that they didn't know they had. I look at parents,
Courage. Yeah.
people with young children in small houses with no gardens, no school, they're bored, they're cracking up, and they're
They can't.
mad.
Yeah.
You know, people are they're taking them out for walks, they're trying to do a bit of schooling with them. I mean, this is heroism. So the fact that you can put up a drip on somebody, or what, you know, is it's another skill, but it's you know,
It may be, at
people are
the same
using the
time,
skills that they have.
you
So
put yourself back on the front line of this, and I think most people will find that hugely admirable. Was medicine in your family background?
no. My father was an only child of a publican, and I think he was spoilt rotten. And he talked. His is a really strange story, but he was to go and do medicine, and as with so many families, I suppose there was conflict at home, and he ran away and joined the British Army, and was
Sounds
a
like going from a song somehow. Yeah,
sorry.
he ran away and joined the British Army.
He
Yeah,
did, you know, and don't forget, my father was a staunch Republican, as were his whole lineage. And he joined it in peacetime before the Second World War, and then the world changed, and he ended up fighting Nazism, but with a sort of he really didn't want to be there, and he was taken prisoner of war. Um, in the Western Desert in North Africa, and was sent to an Italian prisoner of war camp. And he talked about the big German officer asking him, you know, you must tell us what your plans were. He was in some sort of reconnaissance thing. You know, what were they doing? And Mira says, well, sure, I can't. And the German said to him, well, why not? And he said, because it would be dishonourable. And the big German officer went, you speak to me of honour, an Irishman in the British Army. And Mira said, well, yeah, I accept totally what you're saying, but I'm still not doing it. So he was in a work camp in Italy, and then he escaped. Like, it was never talked about at home. This was our dirty family secret. He escaped over the Alps with a few other boys, and he spent the last year of the war in a place called Grindelwald in Switzerland. I visited it, you know, and it was beautiful. But he talked about whenever he was even fighting, the rest of the boys used to go to the pub and the houses of ill repute in Cairo on a Saturday, and he spent his time with the nuns in a convent there. And he talked about this garden where he did a lot of praying, and he says he wasn't praying for himself; he was praying for his mother, because she had only one child, and he wanted home for her. You know, and that was the kind of man he was. You know, he was a huge inspiration in my early life. So he always said she became the doctor for me.
You became the doctor man. So religion was a big part of your childhood and of your life. You went on to do medicine, but you had a political background before Aintu, hadn't you? You were involved with politics before you ran with Aintu.
I went to well, sure, look, I'm a child of the Troubles. You know, I was young when the civil rights movement started. I remember Bloody Sunday. It's the first time I ever saw my father crying, and it was tears of rage and frustration. I remember it vividly. I remember the funerals. I visited jails of friends of mine who I went to Irish college with, and they ended up in jail. This was a conflict that
Bloody Sunday was followed by
a lot of it was reactive. Sorry. A lot of it was reactive to the brutality of the state and the injustice of the gerrymandering and discrimination that went on. And I'm in no way sort of extolling the virtues of the armed struggle. But what I am saying is that I fully understand why it happened. And some of the people from very ordinary, apolitical backgrounds became involved in a vortex of madness. So I joined Sinn Féin in
That
Freshers
vortex
Week.
Yes, you were young and idealistic.
I'm still young and idealistic, I like to think. No, I did. I joined Sinn Féin in Freshers
Yes,
Week,
so
and I
I
wasn't
wanted
terribly active, but you know, I certainly I would have worked outside of the party structures in order to try and achieve peaceful, um, peaceful alternatives for justice. So I was involved in campaigns, for example, around the discrimination, the McBride principles, the equality campaign,
yes.
stuff about social justice locally, prisoners' issues, so that, you
Why not
know,
the SDLP? Why
sorry,
not the
Pat,
SDLP? Yeah, sorry, I know my connection is very poor.
again.
Why not the SDLP at that point?
Because the
Why?
SDLP weren't Republicans and they're still not Republicans. I was brought up in a house where we went to Donegal, you know, every weekend. We did not recognise the border.
Yes,
I went to University College in Dublin because that was my capital city.
yes.
My father, you know, was, and both my parents, my mother would have been, she liked John Hume. All Derry women loved John Hume because he was
I
so,
love it. Yeah.
but republicanism is different to social democrats, and I still regard myself as a Republican. I keep
Did
saying
you, did you
Sinn
feel
Féin
Dublin?
left me. I didn't leave Sinn Féin.
Did you feel Dublin was the capital that had abandoned you and Northern nationalism?
Absolutely. As a medical student, I remember, you know, my classmates coming up and saying, "How dare you come down here and take our university places?" So I'd been reading them Articles 2 and 3 of the Irish Constitution as it was in those days. Excuse me, pending the reintegration of the national territory, I have as much right to be here as you have, uh, and that's still my feeling. So yeah, I'm Irish. I speak Irish. I play music. I sing. You know, I have no Britishness in me. But I respect
I think
my
it was Sinn,
fellow citizens who regard themselves as British. Yeah.
I think it was Seamus Heaney's line, "No glass of ours was raised to toast the Queen. My passport was ever green." I think it was Heaney's line on that.
Yeah.
When the Republican movement, I mean, it did descend into, as you said, a vortex, but it descended into a vortex of horrendous violence. And it tends to be, I find at times, it's hard to ignore that, is it not?
The violence come from a
Things like,
vacuum. You know, the first bombs were planted by the UVF in an attempt to blame them on the IRA. The first shots were fired by the RUC. The first person murdered in Derry was murdered by armed thugs wearing the uniform of the Crown. Do you know, this didn't come out of a vacuum. This wasn't some sort of psychopathy in Irish Catholics. And it never, of course, was about religion. This is a war about identity, about colonization, about imperialism.
yes.
Do you want me to stop now? Do you
Oh, no,
know,
no, I don't want you to stop. I think this is for another.
it
I
sounded
will,
very
we will do this
frustrating.
interview, but it's not the one I want to do tonight. But I certainly think there's a really interesting interview in there because
Yeah.
you said it was war. I think the rules of war were fairly well broken by all sides on that.
There's no doubt. This was a war that nobody won and nobody lost, and everybody suffered from. You
Yes,
know, this was a war, and you look back now and say, for what?
yes.
You know?
I'd have just as a disclaimer. I became friends on social media with Anne Travers. So you
Yes.
know the actual story,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Of
like,
course.
those were brutal crimes. Did that never give you pause about Sinn Féin?
Of course it did. Of course it did. And that's why my efforts were spent largely trying, because yeah, it's better to light a candle and curse the dark. And you cannot condemn violence unless you are prepared to put your time and energy into finding alternative ways of achieving
And you
just
did.
solutions for people. Don't forget, the IRA campaign had a broad swell of support among decent, good,
Yeah.
God-fearing wonderful, warm-hearted people. And you know, it wasn't fought in a vacuum. There was support for it, and there was support for it among, you know, it was.
Which unionists find really hard to understand. They've never, most unionists find this incomprehensible. But then in many cases, unionism has never acknowledged that Northern Ireland was a failed sectarian state.
Totally. This is why I think we're having such problems with the peace process, because we still don't have a shared analysis of what happened. I mean, we still don't have the recognition that unionist politicians were hand in glove with loyalist paramilitaries, being manned, supplied, armed, educated and resourced by the British government, the highest echelons of the British government. So it was a very unfair conflict, and people saw that, and a lot of it was rage and impotence, and if you like, and I mean, my problem, and I get what you're saying, was that it could then be construed as a sectarian war, and it never was about sectarianism. For us, it was about nationality and about justice and about, there was an element of maybe revenge for deeds that were done. I don't like the word tit for tat, because it was worse than that. I mean, the might of the British state, the army, the police force, the security services and everything were pitted against a crowd of teenage young fellas who were poorly equipped and were badly led, and really had, you know, most of them, if you'd actually sat them down and asked them what they were fighting for, they couldn't have told you. And that's the reality of it.
In this background, you become a GP and you go into practice. And what was your political involvement like during those years after university? You know, you fought various campaigns for justice, but did you take any political role? Did you run for office during this time?
I had 4 children, for God's sake. 4 children and a husband and a full-time job. And in those days, it was back in the day, you did 1 in 4 nights. You know, you'd be running to Carnhill at 3 in the morning and 5 in the morning, and maybe breastfeeding a child when you got home. And, you know, it was fairly full on for a while. And then I sort of went back, but it was more in helping prisoners' wives and prisoners' families, you know, in that sort of more practical way, I suppose. I was writing stuff as well, but my husband is from Limerick, and his people would be dyed in the wool fine Gael. So I remember the first time I went down to their house, you know, and if he'd landed with a Martian with green feet, they couldn't have been less horrified. So yeah, they came right to me eventually.
They would have been much less horrified by the Martian.
I think that's probably true. Yeah, they did warm to me eventually, I like to think.
They did. How could they not? Now, you were pro-life all of this time. You were, you know, you believed in that abortion was wrong.
Totally, always. Well, I mean, I think everybody instinctively, you know, our instincts. It takes a lot of educating of yourself to get away from that basic instinct that we are created in our mother's wombs and we're here for a reason, you know. So that, but certainly as a young woman,
work really hard at it.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was saying you have to work really hard at it, don't you?
You have to work hard to not be pro-life. I think it requires a degree of indoctrination. But when I was a young woman, I cared about men, drink, partying, fashion, makeup, stuff like that. And even as a young doctor, it was the crack and the next night out. And I certainly wasn't particularly engaged one way or another, but I suppose that was a more innocent time too, when you didn't have to take sides so much. I remember at a perinatal meeting, I trained in paediatrics, and in the Royal Victoria Hospital, they were talking about a treatment for cystic fibrosis, which was a prenatal diagnosis and selective abortion of the sufferers. And I remember standing up in front of, and I was only a junior doctor, and sat in front of all these professors and consultants and saying, am I the only person in this room who thinks it's reasonable to cure a disease by killing the people who have it? And they sort of shuffled and looked embarrassed and sort of, you know, I remember that. But it was one night, I remember in the special care baby unit, whenever the day staff went home, you'd be there by yourself, maybe with 2, 3, maybe sometimes 4 wee children on ventilators fighting for their lives, maybe twins, you know, and you'd be there, and it was horrendous. You know, you really didn't know what you were doing. It was, you know, there was very little senior cover, and you were there just doing what you could, and you did not sleep. This is after a day's work and before another day's work. That's how it worked. And I remember looking at these children with the tubes and watching how they hated me for doing suction or doing procedures, or, you know, taking blood tests or doing blood gases, and they felt it, and then they loved it when you petted their heads. And these are wee kids now of 25, 26 weeks, you know, very, very small wee things the size of a pound of sugar.
Fragile skin. Their skin even is fragile at that stage, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And we had to give them a tight enough time, putting drips up in their skulls and you know, doing exchange transfusions and stuff like that. But I think it was during those nights when the place was quiet and you were sitting maybe alone with a wee baby, trying to bat off the Grim Reaper, that it really, the humanity of the child, who was, I mean, these children were totally dependent. If I'd taken the tube out, they were dead in 5 minutes.
Yes.
So, but they were human, and they had feelings and they had emotions. And you could see sometimes when the parents came to visit, you go, God, you're the spit of your father, you know, and we think the size, you know. Yeah. And, you know, again, this is back in the 80s, and we were kind of looking first at using ultrasound through the soft spot in the skull. This is common stuff now, but this was new at the time, you know, and you know, the ultrasound even for in pregnancy was really in its, you know, in its infancy. Now we can see from the baby is days old, the incredible development and differentiation inside the mother's womb. It's just amazing. You know, the way, I'm funny, I'm going to sound terribly highfalutin. I was away on holidays there. I was reading a book on
This is wonderful.
Epigenetics is about, you know, how identical twins turn out differently, and how your genes get suppressed, and, you know, the whole thing. A monkey at a typewriter can't do that. That is creation. That is, it is, there is so much that cannot be accidental, you know. So once you look at the science and religion aren't in conflict, you know.
No.
My scientific knowledge feeds my belief in a creator. There, you know, it just does. The more you know, I'm not saying I know an awful lot, but I mean, reading a book about epigenetics is, this is not an accident.
Yes. Right now, you've got abortion in Northern Ireland, and you didn't introduce it yourselves. It was foisted upon you.
Yeah. Yeah. The British Parliament, I mean, strangely enough, for Republicans, it's bad. Apart from the Republicans, obviously, who have been so desensitized, you know, that they celebrated.
Do you feel betrayed by Sinn Féin now?
Well, I don't recognise Sinn Féin anymore. I say I didn't leave Sinn Féin; they left me. People like Francie Brawley, who gave his life. Who wrote the anthem of the Troubles, I'll wear no convict's uniform nor meekly serve my time, that England might call Ireland's fight 800 years of crime. The man who wrote that could no longer be a member of that movement. And very many of the hunger strikers' families and that are appalled by what is going on. We have a senator, for God's sake, who advertises his perversions on Twitter. What? You know, look, do you know, like as Oscar Wilde, as long as you don't frighten the horses, get on with it. But to actually advertise,
Oh, yeah.
it's incredible. It's absolutely.
I think the particular senator you're referring to, his intervention, his contribution to the COVID fight here was to tweet about how people could have sex safely.
That's what I'm talking about.
Casual encounters without. Yeah.
He's
also one of their poll-topping senators.
I saw that. So obviously,
it's incredible.
It incredible is the word, and I do believe.
Sinn Féin,
but it's not really about Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin, I think, will ride the crest of this wave and will become an irrelevance because they no longer adhere to the tenets of the Proclamation of the Republic, which said we must cherish the children of the nation equally. We must respect one another. We must, it's all rhetoric. It's nonsense. It's hollow. And I think we have a generation of university educated people who. I have a very good friend who's the wife of a Republican prisoner, and she had 7 sons while he was in and out of jail. She had a horrific life, but did the best she could for her family. And she says her lovely quote about modern day Sinn Féin activists is, she says, they wouldn't know a hard day if it hit them up the bake. Bake is dairy for your mouth. Wouldn't know a hard day if it hit them up the bake. And she's right. People like her who they're just going, what?
Yeah, these are
what?
This is who they are.
It's horrific. So, going back to the Brits imposed this dreadful abortion regime, and it was driven by the hard Marxist core of Labour because they want to change their laws. They're not happy with the 9 million babies they've managed to kill since 1967. And they want essentially do-it-yourself abortions at home, and the birth canal being that's still a fetus, isn't that what they call it? So that was imposed here, but it could not have been done without the acquiescence of Sinn Féin and the SDLP. It could not have been done. The DUP again.
Any attempt being made to reinstate the power sharing assembly, this wouldn't have happened. But Sinn Féin deliberately delayed it, didn't they? And
that is true, but Colm Eastwood from the SDLP travelled to London to talk and sign Stella Creasy's bill. So they gave permission in London, and Sinn Féin, to their everlasting shame, asked the British Parliament to impose what they knew was against the wishes of the majority of people in the occupied 6 counties of the north of Ireland. They knew that this was against the wishes of the people here, and they still asked that it be done. And shame on them, and it will not be forgotten. Not now and not forever. And this week, COVID is bad, but
yes,
it's like a natural disaster. But this other thing is worse because it's betrayal. It's the worst the British could have done to us. But also, on the day that we went to Stormont and they, people tried to go back and see if they could block this. This is now in the summer. A very good friend of mine who's a staunch DUP supporter came up and she put her head on my shoulder and she said, "Anne, how could they do this to us?" For them, it's a worse betrayal. Because in a way we're going, look, the Brits have been treating us like muck for 800 years. It's not going to change. It hasn't changed. What do you expect? But for them, it was an absolute catastrophe because with the whole thing about...
For loyalists, the parliament to which they're loyal has imposed abortion on them.
Yeah. And I think that came, it came at the same time as a lot of I mean, the DUP in a way got their comeuppance because they were playing kingmakers in England and essentially taking the piss out of the government there, and pretending that they had influence that they actually hadn't, while they held the balance of power. But that was always a straw castle.
Yes.
But this then, as I say, it goes to the core of their feeling that sort of the Conservative and Unionist Party will always be at our back. And they're not. No, they're not.
Yeah.
And the House of Lords, it's. I mean, we were able to show that our laws here save 100,000 lives because of the differential rates in abortion since the 1967 Act was passed. It's a mathematical, and the Human Rights Commission objected to it, and there was a court case, and we won. Both Lives Matter brought that, and were vindicated that the figure was actually correct. There were 100,000.
Doesn't tell us something about the Human Rights Commission that they took this to court?
I think it was the Human Rights Commission who took it to court. Yeah, the Human Rights Commission are funded something like 1.4 million a year. They're an unelected quango. CEDAW, who are at the back of where this law came from, again, are a paid, unelected quango of university educated women who have no influence and no mandate in our country. None.
We have the same thing in the Republic with the Human Rights Commission, but unfortunately, the vast majority of voters in the Republic voted to impose abortion. Shockingly. Now, one of the things that came out of that was the foundation of AIMCU. And you joined Padra's party, you joined AIMCU.
Yes. We had been very active because, as I say, we don't recognise the border.
Yes.
We real Republicans. So the Brollies and Martin McGuinness's brother Declan and a few other renegades got together, and we formed a sort of an alliance and called it Cherish All the Children Equally. Taking the words, and it was to help around the campaign to defend the Eighth Amendment. The day before the referendum, I was in Fannet Head, I think, canvassing. We did nothing else for weeks and weeks and weeks. We worked with people in Letterkenny and in Ashoyne, Donegal, South Donegal. We like to think it was we Northerners who got the Donegal vote, but that's actually not true, because I know it certainly was. I think it had something to do with it. But Donegal people are different. We do things differently up here, But I think
bright spot
influence of some. Paddy, you're in the school again.
I can't describe it. I simply cannot. And I'd gone into the black hole. I was saying I cannot describe what it felt like the next day, that count, knowing that we had lost by that much. It was devastating, absolutely devastating.
Well, I know. You don't have to describe it to me, because I felt the same thing. Because this is my country.
Yes.
And we felt that same sense of disbelief and horror and sadness and betrayal. And we know that it was rigged. We know that the big tech companies had an influence. We know that our so-called national broadcaster was partisan right throughout. We know that people we didn't get a fair crack at it. We know all that. But and it's the same as here. We know that it's not right, that it's unjust, that it's a travesty, that it shouldn't have happened, but it happened. And that is why democracy doesn't work. The law is an ass.
Is media in Northern Ireland as bad as it is down here?
It's worse.
It's worse.
As of today, the laws we have are the most barbaric in Europe. And we have eugenics in law. We have sex-selective abortions in law. There's nothing to stop any of this. I think some of the medical people said today, it will be unusual to have very late-term abortions, but in theory, there's no reason why not. You can, it'll be at a whim up to 12 weeks. And at 12 weeks, don't forget, the baby is fully formed in every organ system, fully differentiated. After 12 weeks, it's just growth. So, and up to 24 weeks, it'll be for more or less any reason. If a woman says, I have a mental health problem, I'm feeling a bit under stress, I'm worried about my other children, then abortion will be permitted up to 24 weeks. And we know that in England, in the 9 million abortions that were done, there has never on one instance been a refusal on the grounds of mental health. Never. You don't have to prove that you have a mental health problem. You just have to say it. Tick the box. Yeah. We now have this thing where they're using the COVID tragedy in order to have DIY abortions for women at home. And we know that women do badly after aborting their children in very many cases. And, you know, we've heard stories of women who say they can't walk past the hospital or the clinic where this thing took place. So now their own home, their own place of safety, the place where they rear their family, the place where they live, becomes the abortion clinic. It's horrific. And it will not, this is not taking women to a good place. It is not helping women. And we know that the evidence is really strong that outcomes for women after abortion are poor, particularly where there's something wrong with the child. Interestingly, the research is very, very clear that where the child has a life-limiting illness, the parents do a lot better, where they give that child the chance of life and meet it. And I've told the story about a patient of mine, and she allows me to use her name. Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. I was saying, is it also because they get that chance to grieve at that stage if they do this, if they go through? Yes. Sorry, you were going to tell us that woman.
Yeah, I had a patient called Mary Rose, and she had, let me get this right, there was twins, there was 4 boys under the age of 5, and Mary Rose had trisomy, and they had to put her mother came in to me and Joanne, and she says, the baby's got a problem. She said, I'll never forget it. Her exact words were, she says, whatever life this child has, even if it's only the life she has inside of me, that's the life I'm going to give her. I will never forget those words. And the baby was born, and she lived for, I think it was about 9 weeks. She had a consultant from the hospital who visited her weekly. She had good family support. Her mum used to have to put the wee cradle incubator thing with all the tubes into the playpen so that the lads could play football around her, sort of to keep them off her, you know. And she told me then, you know, they were devastated and sad, but they have their pictures, they have their memories, they have the weeks of love. The neighbours up in the housing estate were queued out the door with food and presents and wee booties, and you know, and they used to go in and hold the baby and say, look, you know, today I'm holding a child that's going to be an angel soon, you know. So that all of that other way of dealing with it, it doesn't take away the heartbreak, but it makes it human, and it makes it an experience that is not all bad, and it's very.
The heartbreak has happened anyway when you're diagnosed.
Heartbreak would happen anyway, of course. Yes. Joanne was telling me her wee boy was doing spellings at school, and he says the word they were spelling the word sister, and he was, you know, SISTR, and he says, yeah, I had a sister. I had 3 brothers, and I had a sister, but she's gone to heaven to live with God. And that's, you know, a couple of years later. She is part of their family story. And it's not to sentimentalize what happened at all, because there was huge pain with it. But, you know, the notion that you can get rid of a child who's going to die, or get rid of a child who has a trisomy or has Down syndrome or has a cleft or whatever, and that doesn't leave a hole in that parent's heart, that it somehow fixes itself, is nonsense. It can't be right.
It's bizarre, this idea that if we kill this child, everything is fixed.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it pretends
And,
that this child.
and I also, and I've made this point many times, that under our laws, as they were yesterday, not today, but yesterday, where a mother was saying, look, I cannot do this. I cannot, I cannot carry this. There still would have been legally room for a doctor to make a judgment to say that obviously this woman's mental health or so, is going to be damaged by this. We still did have that, if you like, escape clause for the very serious, cases where in conjunction with all interested parties and acting in a way that would be seen reasonable by a jury of his or her peers, a doctor could terminate a child who was not going to live, and where he felt that the mother's mental or physical health was going to be adversely affected. I mean, we treat women with cancer who are pregnant. This happens all the time. And we abort children to save the mother's life if, for example, it's an ectopic pregnancy. If it's not an abortion, but you know what I mean? There are clinical cases where people must use their judgment. But as a, now we know that we will have no children with Down syndrome within a few years. That will happen. It's happened in every country which has had eugenic abortion. And I think that will be a huge loss to all of us.
All of us, yeah, all of society.
All
because
of us.
People don't change the society we live in. They change us.
After I stopped the hospital pediatrics, I did a bit of community peds, and that's kind of the interface between health and education, if you like. So people with physical problems or intellectual challenges, it's trying to get the best fit for them so that they can be the best people they are, and trying to get their education tailored. So if they'd hearing problems, making sure they had their aids, and that they had a social worker who understood the needs and their housing was suitable, all that stuff. And I used to wonder, were children with complex problems born into the homes of angels, or did they make angels of the people around them? And I still don't know, but there's no doubt that there is, in the very many cases, in fact, almost without exception, these children change the people around them for the better.
Okay.
And that's been my experience, without exception. Yeah. And again, it's not to trivialize the difficulties that people have dealing with children with multiple handicaps. But you look at the like of Tracy Harkins, Kathleen Rose, and the love that Tracy has, and her husband and the family have for that child is, it's something exceptional. And our world will be the poorer without that type of example and experience.
Without that care, without that experience in it, the world will be poorer and crueler. Yeah. It'll be definitely a crueler world.
I think you're right. And this mantra about, me, myself, I, choice, autonomy, all that it's a sterile philosophy. It doesn't work for people. It doesn't work for healthy children either.
But it doesn't work for children, it doesn't work for people. But also we're noticing the lie of that philosophy, because the very people that told us that bodily autonomy was really important are now telling us that we must be interned in our homes. So clearly bodily autonomy isn't that terribly important in some situations.
Yeah. I think this coronavirus, as I say, the timing of the imposition of these barbaric permissions to kill the most defenseless, coinciding with whenever people are being asked to make monumental sacrifices in order to keep one another safe, and particularly our elderly and vulnerable, it's quite bizarre to look at the hypocrisy of the positions.
I want to get you back to your role with Aintree, because you were elected to the council.
I was.
In the local elections. Are you the only elected representative for Aintree in Northern Ireland now? at the moment.
I'm the only person who was elected. There's a girl called Denise Mullen who was with the SDLP and who,
And
again, probably over the life issue, who changed after the elections. She fought the elections on an SDLP ticket. We had a couple of people who polled very, very well, but at that time, I mean, the last year has been horrific. We fought 5 elections, I think, including a by-election, 3 in the. Let me get this right, because again, I canvassed north and south, so it's just been wall to wall bloody posters, and you know, I have a wee granddaughter who lives with us, my youngest daughter's wee one, and I'd be driving her to school. You know, she goes to the Gael school, and she go, "Kenny, is she up a lamppost? Kenny, is she up that lamppost too?" You know? So yeah, I got the posters have been up twice, and I have them behind the shed, ready for the next outing. You know. Yeah, into is I can't think of anything I would want to do less than be a politician. I actually can't. I would cheerfully empty bins for the rest of my life rather than have to do the political bit. But into I think was necessary to offer people, and I polled pretty well in Derry, but even if I'd only got 10 votes. But even if I'd only got 10 votes, it was 10 people who had no one to vote for if I hadn't been there. Yeah.
Yes.
So and people are very, we've people who have had relations who've been killed in the Troubles who vote DUP on the life issue. It goes very, very deep, and a lot of very, you know, very deep and staunch and you know, generational Republicans now no longer have a voice, and it's difficult. It's difficult. I mean, we got no funding. We're skint. No, skint would be lovely. We're in debt. You know, to be skint would be really bliss at the moment. But it's okay, because that'll all look after itself some way. We get no media traction really. At the local press here now are very good to me, I must say. But a lot of it you're dependent on social media and stuff like that, which is fine. But it has to be done. It just.
You see a big difference between Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, the policies they're following there, and the policies that they follow in the South.
Well, they're two different parties in terms.
Sinn Féin seems to be two different.
Well, in this, you know, with regard to the life issue, they're proud to be barbarous, as far as I can see. They think this is a good thing, that the most vulnerable of our people are expendable. They look, you know, I mean, it's a hugely complicated issue, even apart from the morality. I mean, even looking at how a society functions, without young people, your society dies. We have here a population that is greying and becoming frailer, and we have to import people to mind them, because, you know, look, and I'm meant to check up on this, but I think I'm correct in saying, paradoxically, that the population in Italy will grow as a direct result of the coronavirus, because the people that died were, by and large, people who were old and had comorbidities. And I'm in no way saying that their lives are any less valuable than anybody else's. It's just a stark reality. But for the duration of this crisis, the abortion clinics have been closed. And a nation which had replacement rate for your this is just demographics now, replacement rate is 2.1, and their birth rate was, I think it had got as low as 1.5, which is
they've been low a long time. Italy stopped, went below replacement rate in the 60s and never got above it again.
That's right. So incredibly, this death and destruction in Italy will increase their population.
By keeping the abortion clinics closed, more people will live than COVID-19 has killed.
That's right.
Extraordinary.
It's mind blowing. to consider that.
The figure is
Um,
really stark. The figure for the entire planet is really stark. Yesterday, 154,000 people died of a single cause, often in agony, and that was abortion.
yes.
It is
Yeah.
the single largest killer on earth.
Yeah. And the single largest killer of women. Don't forget, abortion disproportionately affects women because we are the useless sex in the narratives of some, particularly Middle Eastern countries. Unless you have a bullet attached to you, you're no good. You know, I'm being flippant, but it's you know, it's the biggest.
Abortion is discriminatory, it's sexist, it's ableist,
Yes.
it's racist. You know, it's all of those things.
More Black people are aborted in New York City than are born. So yeah,
And
and
where's the
I
future
think
for Intel?
you know I'm always hopeful. I think you know I actually think the rest of the world, Ireland is always, we are such a post-colonial tip that we have to ape our masters and kind of slavishly follow. I'm always the person who discovered flared trousers 5 years after everybody else, you know, and I do think the rest of the world will move forward and we'll be left with egg in our faces and we'll kind of, you know, I think that the tide has already turned in very many countries as people are educated and among young people. Don't forget, even in the north there was a post, young women don't want this law. Young men, actually, they get all the sex they want without any responsibility. They're cool with it. Young women are beginning to see that this is not in their interests. It's wonderful, you know. But as I say, we'll catch up with the rest of the world as we always do. We're still wearing the 3 years ago's fashions.
Ann McCloskey, we're going to do this again. I really hope we can do this again because this was like.
I hope you don't sound like a fish called Wanda.
There was so much in there. I want to go back and explore your career as a pediatrician because I thought you were a GP. We want to go.
No, I was, yeah. I packed that in. I decided I didn't want to be a consultant pediatrician. I wanted to go home and make my own little pediatric problems. And this is not a glass ceiling. This was a complete choice.
Yeah,
I wanted to have a family and have time for them. So hospital medicine didn't work.
Well, there's all sorts of things we want to explore there. I think we could do this every night this week, but we have a time limit and we're up against it. And
all the pubs closed. I'm your woman.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
No bother, Patty. All the best. Good to talk to you. Good luck. All right.